Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. Well, that was just a fascinating conversation about, how important internet and technology is going to be going forward. We've heard about the fourth industrial revolution, et cetera. But I wanted to bring in Charles Burton, a person who's been on my show a couple of times before. He's an expert on Canada-China relations. Mr. Burton, Professor Burton, I've been hearing numerous things about sort of a techno war, a technological Cold War in regards China and Canada, or China and the United States, in regards to sort of who runs the internet, who runs technology. Is that like overblown, or is that a realistic concern?
Well, I think we're already seeing it with the U.S. ban on U.S. Associated companies providing chips and other vital components to Huawei on the basis that Huawei acts as an agent of the Chinese state in its installations, particularly of 5G, but in other aspects as well. And so there's an imperative in China to become independent in the production of this sort of high-tech product as a matter of national security, and I think also as a critical element in China achieving its geostrategic goals. Now, if China controls technology, then it also allows China to have the possibility of enhanced data collection, the use of artificial intelligence, and to set standards for technology in the years ahead. So, a lot of people say that data is the new gold, and certainly China has been using cyber espionage to download massive amounts of data, which would then be assessed through the use of artificial intelligence to suit Chinese needs. So, the idea that the sort of idealistic idea of the internet, where the components would come from all around the world, and that it would be transnational and for the common good, is being rapidly debased as countries ban Huawei 5G, and China seeks to develop monopolies and be in the forefront of certain technological developments, and then apply these to its relations around the world, and particularly with third world countries. So,
but to call it a Cold War, a new Cold War on data and technology?
well, I mean, that the U.S. is refusing to allow certain components to go to China because it's seen that these technologies serve China's geostrategic rise and its military, both in terms of facilitating the use of kill switches in Chinese technology used in critical infrastructure installations, which is more and more of our critical infrastructure is dependent on computers and the internet, and also because of the cyber espionage aspect, and I guess concern that if China has control over global telecommunications through universalization of 5G, that China could then use this control to leverage other geostrategic goals. So I think characterizing it as a Cold War is not entirely without basis if we see that this sort of technology is being increasingly weaponized and not being used for the common good and equal sharing as those early years of technology defined, but really as a means to try and seek national advantage for specific countries like China, like the United States.
So given this description, what do you think Canada and the United States should be doing?
Well, I think that we have to decide that the Chinese state is in many ways hostile to the values and principles that uphold the current post-war order, fairness and reciprocity and the equal participation of sovereign nations, and that technology is being used by the Chinese regime in malignant ways which go against the principles of sovereignty and fairness and reciprocity. So, I think certainly Canada should not be putting in the Huawei 5G, even though it's priced much more reasonably Nokia or Ericsson or Samsung, none of which incidentally are U.S. firms. U.S. is not stopping Huawei with a view to putting in U.S. technology, but simply to put in technology that come from regimes that are devoted to democracy and the values of citizenship, fairness, openness, and transparency. So I think that until the Chinese regime is seen as genuine in its commitment to fair relations between states, that we shouldn't be using the technology that regime controls through its Chinese Communist Party in our critical installations. And from that point of view, I guess there is a Cold War, and certainly, the idea that China would be providing this kind of technology to third world dictatorships to facilitate repressive surveillance and other benefits to China's aspirations to dominance of global affairs based on its own autocratic, non-democratic principles is something that we should recognize as a threat to the survival of Canada as a democratic nation, and to the alliance of like-minded nations that have made the global community one that's of such benefit to Canada in trade and diplomacy. In other words, a China-dominated world would be one in which Canada would be subordinate to forces of autocracy and that are hostile to democracy and the rights of citizens. So, I think it is a serious matter.
China-dominated world would be one where Canada is subordinated to autocracy. Really?
Well, it's an asymmetrical power relationship, and China certainly doesn't see that countries of less power like Canada should be given equal status in relations between nations. That's a concept which doesn't fit with how the Chinese Communist Party thinks the world should be.
Now, you are one of the foremost experts on Canada-Chinese relations. I was surprised / shocked this weekend when a lot of the people were talking about the first week of the Biden agenda, and they said, climate change, race relations, democracy itself, and China were the main issues that Joe Biden had to deal with. China was in the top 5. You agree?
Yes, well, Mr. Biden, prior to the election, did write an article in Foreign Affairs where he said the establishment of an alliance of democracies to defend the international rules-based order would be his #1 foreign policy priority. And what they're really talking about is China as a disruptive power that seeks to debase the role of these multilateral institutions like the WTO, like the UN, and establish institutions which serve the overall global domination ambitions of the current Chinese regime much better. So, I think that we do have to take it seriously, because China is quite explicit in its aspirations. It assumes that the United States is a power in decline and expects powers like Canada to get along with what China wants. And the Meng Wanzhou case is an example where China fully expected that Canada would ignore its obligations to the U.S.-Canada extradition treaty and simply put Ms. Meng above the law and allow her to travel through Canada with us ignoring the request from the United States for extradition. And then when we didn't comply, China engaged in outrageous hostage diplomacy in arbitrarily detaining 2 Canadian citizens and subjecting them to brutal mistreatment solely to try and pressure the Canadian government over the Meng Wanzhou matter. So, when you look at this, multiply it by Chinese behavior in countries around the world of a similar ilk, then you see that we do have a serious problem here. And, as our government has said, the 2 Michaels are Canada's primary foreign policy concern, and it's causing us to have to focus on that to other matters of promoting Canadian security and prosperity that that our government would be able to pursue more freely if we didn't have to respond to China just not playing by the established rules of, even the Vienna Convention on diplomatic relations, not to speak of expectations of complying by the WTO and complying by normal norms of diplomacy, where you just don't arrest foreign nationals without charge, hold them for 770 days without any explanation, and denying ordinary consular access. These kinds of things are a serious violation of the rules of the game that allow for a peaceful and prosperous world.
Charles Burton, thank you so much for joining us. We've had two esteemed professors join us tonight, one speaking about the importance of the internet and how it's going to change Canada, and one cautioning us, Charles Burton, on our involvement with China in that regard, and whether it's a new industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution that some people talk about, and or whether it is, but we've got to be worried about the technology we use and what China's control. I think there's some important issues ahead of us. Charles Burton is a senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute. He's a professor at Brock University, and he's with the European Value Center for Security Policy at the University of Alberta. Professor Burton, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good to speak with you.
Thank you very much.